Howdy, Jacob here. Today we're going to do something a little different. So you're looking at the same model that most of my projections are based off of, but today I'm just going to go over a reminder so that you can incorporate this into your own analysis, tweak it the way you want, and just go over some of the assumptions of why I do some of the things that I do here. So if you look at this model and you want to create it yourself, I would say that's awesome. And again, just tweak it the way you want to. I know other people have more basic free cash flow calculation models where, you literally just take earnings and then 10 years from them, discount it, bam. There's really only two things that are different about my model. And the biggest differences are the dividend calculation and the share change calculation. And so because of that, um, you might think my free cash flow calculation is a bit different because it's only doing the free cash flow year over year of the dividend and then taking the terminal value inclusive of being present valued through the discount rate and not taking the cash every year. But that's again because I'm assuming that with the five things you can do with free cash flow, you can make acquisitions, reinvest back into yourselves, pay a dividend, buy back shares, and pay down debt. And so I'm including acquisitions and reinvestments in my revenue change and net income margin assumptions. I'm assuming a share change, buying back shares or issuing shares, whatever. And then I'm assuming the dividend. And so paying down debt, I'm not including into here. Maybe I'll include it into the terminal P, changing that terminal value. But besides that, I'm already using what the company would do with their free cash flow and making assumptions there. And so I don't want to double count the free cash flow that the company makes and also calculate their dividend, calculate their share repurchases. So that's a little caveat there. But if you do want to create this model yourself, you really just need the revenue, the current rolling 12 revenue. And then here are all my assumptions. These are all hard input. You have your revenue growth number, your net income margin, free cash flow margin, share change, terminal P, terminal free cash flow, and then the discount rate. And then to the right here is where we'll back up. Hopefully you can still see the screen fairly well. So here I just have a 7-year time horizon, and that's because in a lot of the research that I've done, I've noticed that historically about 7 years was the peak to peak, trough to trough. It's just the market cycle is roughly around a 7-year time horizon. And so that's part of the reason that I have my analysis for that. This formula is straight up pulling from the revenue figure that you're pulling from. If you want to just input that number there, the rolling 12 revenue, that's fine. And then this formula is going to be copied and pasted all the way across, and it's just taking the previous year's revenue and increasing it with the revenue growth that you're assuming. And you can see that's just what it's doing every single year. And then the next line is your dividends. So this is going to be your current year's dividend, and then you can increase it, decrease it, depending on what their dividend is in relation to their free cash flow, how much they've increased it in the past, and what have you. So this is going to be on a per share basis, 96 cents a share for Apple, for example. And you can see here, again, I didn't say this, but this is in billions of dollars. And again, it's just because the way I formatted this is to be within the billions of dollars. And so if you did it millions, you didn't change anything, it just looks better to me at 385 billion rather than 385, 706, 000, So keep that in mind. And then I have the present value. So if you don't have a dividend, this number is just going to be zero for the first 6 years until the terminal. Or it's going to be zero every year because you're not calculating the present value of the dividend because they don't have it. So you can see here it's just taking the dividend, dividing it by the discount rate, and then using present value. So if it's been 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, you can see that the present value is diminishing, and that's because the present value is based on a 15% return, and the dividend is only increasing at a 6% return. So that's that's those two items, or that's almost every single item. The last item is your total estimation. And so this is going to seem a bit more complicated, but I'll hopefully be able to explain myself to where it makes a bit more sense. So you can see we have the revenue estimate at the end of 7 years, but we're doing a present value of earnings in free cash flow. So we don't necessarily care about the revenue. We just care about what will be the earnings estimate at that year and what will be the free cash flow estimate at that year. And so we take all of the present value of dividends, and it's already been present valued, so we don't need to incorporate that into discounting again because that would be double counting. So we're just taking all of the dividends and saying, based on a dividend model, it'd be worth $4.60, which we can see that that's clearly not what it is, and that's because Apple produces a hefty amount of free cash flow. And we calculate this by taking the revenue figure, multiplying it by the margin, and then we divide that by the total number of shares multiplied by the share change. So this is going to be a reduction of, it's currently 15.3 billion shares outstanding. And at the end of the 7-year period, it's going to be quite a bit lower. So we can see if we just take that, let's see, why did that not work? Okay, maybe this will work. 200, no, that's not it. Okay, because that was by 7. So if we just take the number of shares outstanding, we see that currently there's 15.3 billion shares outstanding. I'm assuming at the end of 7 years, based on them buying 2.5% of their shares per year, it's going to diminish down to 12.8. And then you multiply it by the terminal PE. So you're just taking the present value of your earnings, you're dividing it by the total number of shares that there will be at that point, and then putting a multiple to it. And in this case, it's 20. And then you're dividing that whole thing now by the discounted rate at the end of 7 years. So if you want to go through and just pause this part of the video, walk through the calculation one more time. I'll do it one more time with free cash flow. Hopefully it makes a little bit more sense here. So I'm taking the present value of the dividends, and they're already present valued. I don't have to discount rate them. Okay. And then from there, I'm also adding on the second piece. The second piece is the revenue multiplied by the margin, and that's to get to what will their earnings or what will their free cash flow be at the end of 7 years. I'm dividing it by the share change, because this will give me my earnings per share, free cash flow per share at the end of 7 years. And then I'm discounting it by the 15% assumption that I have over here. If you want to do 10, 20, whatever it is, that's fine. But that's how I calculate my present value calculation. And this is with the mindset that I'm already including all 5 things you could do with free cash flow year over year. So the only thing I really care about is at that end of 7-year period or end of the time period that I'm doing, and what is that today. And so again, please change this how you want. If you want to make it easier, that makes sense to you, then absolutely do that. But for me, this was the model that made the most sense to me, because if you look at a company's quarterly reports and you look at their year-over-year growth, or you look on QuickFS, macro trends, whatever view that you look that has multiple years of data in it, those increases are inclusive of reinvestment and acquisitions. And so if you simply just calculate the most basic present value calculator, you might be double counting the acquisition and the reinvestment portion. And so that's why I'm including the acquisition reinvestment in my revenue change and margin. And then I'm also pulling out the share change in the dividend, with saying debt reduction just maybe changes the terminal P or something. So hopefully this was a understandable video and it helps. Please pause wherever that makes sense to you. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.